So it's nice to see you all. Good evening, Erev Tov, and tonight we're going to be learning together a Midrash on the parasha, right? This series is based on the parasha, and if you look at the midrashim, we can be learning here for hours. There's so many different things, and we're trying to decide. There's so much to discuss from the beginning of the parasha, and then you have the whole issue of Yosef, his brothers, the relationships, what's going on, the whole and of course everything. These weeks are especially important in terms of our foundational understanding of our forefathers and Judaism. So the midrashim are constantly making it relevant for us, and I find it fascinating. But when I was going through the midrashim, so I didn't get past the first four words of this week's parasha, which is what we are going to learn this evening. So we're going to learn from the beginning of Midrash Rabbah, which, as you've learned, there's different midrashim that were written or composed or said at different times. And Midrash Rabbah is the main compilation, you can say, of on the parasha specifically, and also on the Megillot, for example. You have Shir HaShirim Rabbah and others. Then you have additional midrashim that one can also learn, like Midrash Tanchuma and many others. I think the fact that it was compiled in a very orderly way gave it its popularity, that it became very easy and also easy to print once the printing press. Like it's very fascinating also, just as a side note, to look at which books were printed when the printing press was invented. And the Jews were the first, I think, to take the biggest advantage of what this means. We're people of knowledge, and what does it mean that you can actually spread knowledge like that? So it's very interesting in itself, and the Midrash Rabbah became very, very popular. As well as specific commentaries on the parasha, which then sort of set the frame till this day of which commentaries we are learning. The ones that it was easier maybe to print, or the ones that became popular through the printing press, and that gives a very specific coloring to the black and white of the Torah. In other words, many things, like last week, we're not going to go into it, but how do we think of Esav? If we read the psukim, if we just read what it is that is said about him, and then immediately I can say, growing up in an Orthodox, I grew up in a Haredi yeshiva when I was young, actually learning in Yiddish. I don't know if you knew that, of Jair. Learning the Taich, the translation in Yiddish, in an ultra Orthodox, and it was very clear. You have Rashi is not no less important, and the way that he depicts Esav, which is very far away from the pshat, from what is written, becomes sort of the what we are told and how we formulate. So that's a bit of an just an introduction. But you've been learning midrashim now for some time, so maybe that all of that is obvious to you. So let me try to find where I have. One second. Here we go. So we can begin at the midrashim as they begin from when the 84th chapter of the midrashim, 84:4, in which we're just discussing the first words of this week's parasha. And the first words of this week's parasha, Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv. Sorry, it's 5 words, not 4. Vayeshev Yaakov. I'm going to give a little translation, and Rav Yair, you can you can correct me or you can add, but Vayeshev, the literal translation, Vayeshev Yaakov, and Yaakov settled in the land of that his fathers had lived, one can say. Vayeshev Yaakov is also interesting because it says he settled or he sat in the land. What does it mean that he sat in the land? And he's sitting where? In the land of his fathers, which is also interesting, and I think it's an opening to the Midrash because we know where he was. We know that he was in the land of Canaan, and we also know from the previous psukim where he is. He's actually in Hebron. So, what is this meaning? What is it coming to tell us that he sat in the land of his fathers? And what does it mean
And
he
if I
sat?
remember
Because
correct of Moshe David, this
yeah.
is the first time that they talk about this land without saying Eretz Canaan. Like there are places where you said the Eretz Hazot, but like giving it a different description.
And
I don't
yes,
remember everything, but I think
yes, I think you're correct. And not only that, it's that it's connected to his forefathers. In other words, it's no longer the land I will show you like we have by Abraham,
yeah.
and it's and Haaretz Hazot was said by Yitzchak, for example, but here there's a connection that he's sitting in the land. In other words, we already have a third generation. Maybe it's also connected to that. We have the first generation who are the immigrants, right, coming, right, Abraham and Sarah coming from a different land, and then the second one are the ones who stay in the land, Yitzchak and Rivka. Yitzchak never left. We spoke about that in the Midrashim before as well. Yitzchak who stayed in the land and never left, even when he was hungry, unlike the others. And then here you have the third generation, and there's a lot of talk about first generation, second generation, third generation, in which when do you actually settle down? And the word Vayeshev is very unique. He's settling down, and what does it mean? To settle, and it's connected to his roots. It's connected to his the fact where he is coming from. However, and this is the word that we're going to discuss today, Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv, and the word migurei is very interesting. Migurei is that he's in the land in which his
But that comes at the end of the Midrash of Moshe David. So you uh,
yeah, I'm not going to give out the right. I'm not going to give. I'm just noting how we can learn, or how to learn the pasuk. What are the words, right? Beretz migurei aviv. What does the word migurei mean? What does it mean in the land that his forefathers had lived? But then, what is migurei, and what is it connected to? So
yes.
all of this is sort of an opening to the first 5 words of this week's parasha and how we relate to them, or I would say questions that should be sort of light bulbs that should be waking up when we're reading the psukim. Never just. I think it's also never just accept and say, "Oh, that's what it says in the Torah." Rather, ask yourself, "What is the meaning?" Even if it's translated to English or to some other language. But it's especially important to practice your lashon hakodesh, right? Your knowledge of the Hebrew in the Tanakh, because every word counts and it's never translated properly. Because once you're even translating the Midrash, you have to start explaining, like I just did now, what we're trying to focus on.
Good. But let's open the
Okay.
Midrash that takes us to a complete different something. I would say if I sat in the synagogue where this Midrash was said the first time, when the Beit Midrash, where the rabbi stood up and started talking, I would my first reaction would be, "What? What is he talking about?" Because all the introduction you did of Moshe David about the generations and he sat and he in the land, and here comes the Midrash and open and talked about something completely different. So, um, uh,
So go ahead.
anyone
You can
wants to
read.
read or
I think it's good. You can read, Rabbi Yair, please.
I'll read. Okay, another matter. Um, uh, Yaakov settled. Abraham converted. No, I can't see because you have the black screen there.
One
Uh,
second, 1 second. I lost it because I was trying to see everyone, and then
yeah.
yeah.
So Abraham converted proselytes. That is what it's written. Abraham took Sarai, his wife, and the people that they had made in Haran. Rabbi Elazar said, in the name of Rabbi Yosef ben Zimra, where all who entered the world to assemble, they would be unable to create even a small gnat. And you say, and the people that they had made in Haran, rather, these are the proselytes that Abraham converted. Why then did it say made and did not say converted? It is to teach you that anyone who draws a proselyte near, it is as though he created him. Lest you say that Abraham was converting proselytes and Sarah was not converting them. The verse states, and the people that they had made in Haran. It is not written here that he had made, but rather that they had made. Rabbi Chunia said, Abraham would convert the men, and Sarah would convert the women. Why does the verse state that they had made? It teaches that Abraham would bring them into his house, feed them, give them to drink, draw them near, and bring them under the wings of the divine presence, the Shekhinah. Yaakov too converted proselytes. As it is written, Yaakov said to his household and to all who were with him, remove the foreign gods that are in your midst and purify yourselves. They gave to Yaakov all the foreign gods that were in their possession. Okay, so we have there also a midrash about that. In Yitzchak regards, we have not heard. Where did we hear? Rabbi Yitzchak said, and some taught it in the name of Rabbi Hoshaya, Hoshaya Rabbah, in the name of Rabbi Yudas Bar Simon. Here it is written, Yaakov settled in the land of his father's residence. This our quotation from the beginning. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz megurei aviv. What is the meaning of his father's residence? Megurei, those whom his father converted. Migiyurei. So this is a play on the word. Instead of reading megurei as form of residence where he lived, where he sat, where he resident, we changed the way we pronounce it. As you know, the Torah originally didn't have vowels, so you could change the way of reading. So instead of Megurei Aviv, Migiyurei Aviv. Yes, Rav Moshe David, any correction to the simple explanation of the Midrash?
No, before we go into it, I'm wondering, there's many things to discuss, but it's interesting. Just I'm going to jump into the middle of the Midrash just because I find it interesting because it we already explained that Abraham and Sarah were Abraham was converting the men and Sarah, and then you need another rabbi, Rabbi Chunia, to say, Abraham would convert the men and Sarah would convert the women. I would expect that why do you need another rabbi? You understand what I'm saying? In other words, it's very interesting how much emphasis is put on, we say it almost twice, or double emphasis on Abraham converting the men and Sarah, but that's just like a side note on this. But if we look at this midrash, first of all, it's fascinating because it's sort of like you're saying, you're sitting there in the Beit Midrash, and you're discussing the pasuk Vayeshev. You come to hear Parashat Shavua from the rabbis in the 4th century, and
And you already
you're
know,
coming to.
right? You know that it's about Yosef and the brothers and like you know what the topics in the parasha. It's not the first time you have heard it.
Imagine you're coming in. You've had a long work in the fields, and you're coming Thursday night maybe into the Beit Midrash in the city in the Galil, and you're coming to hear the rabbi who's preparing everyone for Parashat Shavua. Maybe it's Wednesday night. Maybe the Nordic Beit Midrash continues that tradition. Who knows? But in other words, you're coming in and expecting a conversation about the whole idea of Yaakov, maybe like I was suggesting before, his connection as a third generation to his parents. And suddenly you see a completely different conversation come in, or a completely different topic, unexpected, which at the end of the day is a play on words of the fact that the word ger, which is a proselyte, a convert, shows up in the middle of nowhere. And before we go forward into the Midrash, I would like to talk a little bit about this word ger, because what is it? The word ger, which is used for a proselyte or a convert, the basis of the word ger is to live, right?
To
Lagur,
settle, yes.
to settle, right?
It's funny,
However,
Moshe David, it's funny you mention it because someone that just recently came to me and said that they find it very difficult, the term conversion. They said to me like I feel very. They told me something about how they feel bad about about seeing the conversion, the change. And then they said maybe you can try to think of the word in Hebrew. The word gayer is not convert. Convert is like taking something that you are and change it, right? To convert it to something else, like a convertible. You take a car and you take the roof off. Now it's something else. Now it's a car without a roof. It's a different type. Or when you convert, it's about the changes happen. Lidgayer, it's about where you want to find yourself, right? The place where you are going to sit. It's funny that really, just a couple of weeks ago, I had this conversation with someone, and I think it's a beautiful thing that they said that Lidgayer focuses on where are you going to settle, and not in what are you leaving and changing, like what is left behind and taking something new, different. Lidgayer is about where you're heading, where you're going to, where do you want to settle yourself, among who.
however, I'm going to take that, but on it could be also a bit different or contrary, because we have the two terms that are used in the same pasuk. Vayeshev is to settle, and then be'eretz migurei aviv, and then we know that the word lagur is actually used in the opposite when Am Yisrael come down, when they come down to Egypt, then they say lagur ba'aretz banu. We are not going to settle in the land. We're actually strangers, and we are only going to be here temporarily. So I find it very interesting that
But also, David, there are other places you see the opposite. Like that you need to treat the foreigner who lives among you like Avraham. Avraham is ger, right? It doesn't mean Avraham is going wants to leave at some point. He's also ger in Eretz Canaan, and when we talk about how we treat the gerim that are live among us, we say ki gerim heitem beretz Mitzrayim. I know you take the midrash about that we didn't want to settle, but the Gerim are actually people who decided to live here. Haichad balagur, it said about Lot, right? And right when he comes to Sodom, and he came to be a resident there. Like that's
and
his.
also today, in modern Hebrew, of course, you would say lagur, right? You don't say I came to sit. I came to live, and I came to live, or where efat agar, where do you live? But I think that there's a deeper meaning in the sense, maybe connected to other midrashim, bikesh Yaakov leshev b'shalva, that in this world you actually are never permanent, that you are always temporary here in this world. So even the most permanent residence that you have, right, then it will be considered temporary in a sense. And
Just
that
like we say,
maybe
ki
that
gerim
also, like
v'toshavim.
you're saying, maybe that opens up to our understanding and relationship to minorities and to others, because you are never, even if you're a majority in a land, you should never look at yourself, and the Torah warns us about this. We should never look at ourselves as a higher, have a hierarchy, right? We're not higher than anyone else because we are permanent residents. Rather, it's a relationship of I know that I'm in this world temporarily. So how permanent can I actually be?
Yeah,
So
just like the word of ki gerim v'toshavim atem imadi. Like you are always like your relations with me as as someone who has both qualities. Toshav is like someone who's permanent, but you also ger. You always both of them. You're permanent, but not permanent. You're always, even when you're permanent, you're also a ger. You're also someone uh, who came to reside here to be for a while, and then continue.
similar into we have a similar relationship to the land itself, right? You have on the one hand nachala. This is it's it's something that belongs to you, that you that is yours. But on the other hand, the Torah warns us and says, "Lo timechar haaretz litzmitut." The land really is never permanently yours in a sense. You cannot buy the land of it's interesting that even in Israel today you never actually buy the land that you are on. You can have the rights to live on the land, you can actually buy the land. It's an interesting law. It's price you pay for it costs to develop the land.
Yeah. Moshe David, I couldn't hear you so well. I don't know if the rest of you also couldn't hear, or if it's my connection.
No,
No,
same.
yeah, it's also mine.
Okay, so Moshe David, you were like stopped.
Now,
No?
okay, so let me try. Let's see how we do this, because then I need
Yes.
to share the document as
I
well.
think we got a symbol from divine forces that tells us that even the internet is not stable, and forever we never can feel completely in our place and secure. There's always something insecurity that comes in. And
I think it's the storm, it was very scary last night.
yes,
So
and
maybe.
might be that, and I promise you that in whatever it is, it's quite more scary.
Yeah. Okay, I moved to my phone. This is probably better.
We hear you great now.
Okay. But then we'll have to see how I can share
You
the
can
source that I can.
send me the link on Moshe David, and I'll share.
Okay. But what I was saying is that it's interesting that even in the Holy Land, right, you have the same, on the one hand, it belongs to you, on the other hand, you can actually never sell it. And till this day, even in modern day Israel, you can never buy the land. You can pay for the development of land, but you actually cannot buy land. It doesn't belong to you, which is interesting. It follows the Torah in a sense. But this idea of and I do want to take this back to the Midrash, because
Yes.
everything we spoke about in my mind is really related to how do we relate to others. And that's where I think it's not only a question of, or we can answer, why does the Midrash start talking about Gerim? Why does it start talking about proselytes? And I would say because it's not only when you put it into this pasuk, then you're saying it's an of the essence of Yaakov's living in the land is that he's not following his father's path, that he's living in the place where the converts of his father were living, which is an astounding statement, because it shows how important they were. First, you're saying, do we even know that Yitzchak converted? It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that he converted anyone, even though we know that specifically we saw the Pasuk about Avraham and Sarah, it's very clear. It says, Et hanefesh asher asu. So the souls that they made, and I want to get to that soon, but I find it really powerful that Yaakov's living in the land is directly connected to the converts of his father and maybe those of his, that this is an essential part of the family in a sense.
Yes. And I thought also think in regarding that there's a huge difference if you could follow the logic of the Midrash. There's a huge difference between the conversions that Yaakov and Abraham did according to the Midrash and the conversions of Yitzchak, because they converted people according to the Midrash, they converted people from Haran. Like they converted people in different place that joined to the journey with them, right? The verse that they talk about Abraham is before we start, like the first thing we hear about it, before he comes to Eretz Canaan, before he comes to the promised land, he brings them along with him, and Yaakov too. So they are part of the journey. While Yitzchak, according to the Midrash here, converts the locals. So this journey is not only a question of bringing someone from the outside that will be my allies, but it's also a question of the relationship that they have with the local people. And the Midrash comes completely against everything. If any one of you have heard about conversion, you all know that Judaism is not missionary, right? This is every one of you heard that we don't try to convert. We don't want. There's no need for people to turn to Jews. And then we read here that all of our forefathers converted, and this is the greatest thing you can do. Like really,
I
like
think
this is completely against everything we've ever read about conversions. It's brings like a completely new questions about what is our relations with non-Jews. Are we supposed to try to, if we follow this midrash, that like brings a huge question to how are we supposed to be and act as Jews wherever we are. So, Moshe David?
I'm thinking that there's a question in one of the midrashim where one can ask, if we're a tight family in which we are not intermarrying and not related to others, so one of the midrashim asks an obvious question that not many ask: we know how Abraham, the Torah tells us at length how Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov got married and to whom. But then what happens onwards with the 12 tribes? Who do they marry? Right? In other words, you have the names of the 70 people who came down to Mitzrayim, right, to Egypt. And the Torah tells us all of them, and there's right one female there. So
But two of them we know of Moshe David.
We
Yosef
know
marries the daughter of the priest in Egypt, and the Yehuda marries a local from which tribe? No, now I'm
Adulami.
Adulam. Yeah, no, Adulami, but that's not the people. That's the city. Yeah, it is. But anyway, the Canaanites, like the locals, the one that Yehuda married. So that is definitely a change that happened in this future. And we could guess that the others married too, outside of the tribe, maybe.
I mean, one of the midrashim comes forward and says something which is, I don't know how to even relate so much to what it says. It says they all married their sisters. So what does that mean in terms
That explains
of
many things of the Jewish people.
Yeah, and what does that actually mean, or what are we supposed to think? But where do we even know that sisters exist there, or that they had twin sisters or whatever? But it's sort of the opposite of Yair, of what you're suggesting here, trying to keep it we're a close-knit family, and they must have married inside, which makes sense in a way because you see how much effort, right? We're learning in the last weeks of going and not marrying the Canaanites and not marrying the locals and going off and sending Eliezer and then right? In the first case and in the second journey, yeah, right. Yaakov goes himself and marries and goes back to his family, because the one thing which is very clear: you do not marry the locals. You have to go back and marry into our family, even though it's very clear that the family, right, were idol worshippers. That's the whole story here. But even so, it's still important to go back and to marry within the family. And
But
then
David, I want to ask you, because the text itself is magnificent, and we have so many things already in the text of Midrash. I think we should. I really have to ask you, what's your opinion about the way the Midrash begins? How do you understand this? The what I have to diuk? How like the Midrash goes after? What's the essence of a giur, calling it as if it's like creating asa, like making of the people. How do you understand this? Like what is the um, what does it mean that this is as a creation? How do you see it?
it's interesting. I saw first, just to go back to that, I don't have the text here. I don't know if I can share it with you, just so, because we went through the Midrash very fast, and then let me see if I
I
can
can
somehow
find it.
share. Okay. So just for someone who, if it was too fast, just to go back to the literal Midrash. The Midrash starts off by talking about Avraham and using the words that Eta Nefesh Asher Asu Becharan, right? That they came to the land of the Canaanites with, or the land that I will show you, with the souls that they had made in Haran. And it's very difficult to even, if someone to say, what is the literal meaning of this? What does it mean to make souls? So here it's very obvious. There's no other way to explain it other than saying they came with others, right? What do you mean? Are they playing with clay in the dough and they came with, right, souls that they had made? What does it mean that they had made? And the Midrash here goes very far out, basically to put Avraham and Sarah almost in the place of the Creator, which is astounding. To say, and the Midrash, what it says is, it says if everyone were to come together to try to create even a small gnat, right, even like a small mosquito or something, it's impossible. But here you have Avraham and Sarah who are creating people, right? It was interesting. I saw one of the Kabbalistic commentaries on this, who says this is a bunch of nonsense, because of course, if we Kabbalists were to come together, we can create anything we want. So it was interesting to see that as a comment. But what does it mean to create? And it goes back to the question of creation itself. And here you have a sense, I would see it as saying that a convert is a new soul, in a sense. That when the convert is going through the process and joining the Jewish people, there's a sense of a new soul being created. It's not the same soul that you had before. And then you can say maybe that soul was already with us on Mount Sinai, as some of the sources say. But still, the idea that this process you talked about before about converting, here it's almost creating. It's even stronger than that. That the person, it's not so that someone can sit in a library and read an encyclopedia of Judaism and become a Jew. Rather, there's a spiritual process that one needs to go through, and that the one who is guiding that is creating soul, is developing your soul in a sense, so much so that it's creating. And the Midrash finds it very important to note, as we said before, that it's Avraham and Sarah, right? That it's both, that it's not that they are, but if we take it one more step, just to look at how do you create a soul? What does it mean to create a soul? If I were to say I want to create a school of creation of souls, so it's what does it mean? It means that you need to care for people, basically. Give them to drink, draw them near, bring them under the wings of the divine presence. And in that order also. You cannot preach and create souls. You cannot stand out on the street and create souls. You cannot go on the YouTube channel and create a soul. You have to bring someone into your home, care for them, give them to drink, draw them there, and bring them under the wings of the divine presence. In other words, the process of creating the soul means that you're bringing someone close to you and under your wings. Where does the divine presence suddenly come in? The divine presence is coming through the process of bringing someone close to you. So it's very powerful that it's not about knowledge at all. It's almost, it doesn't say anywhere, right? It's, look, it says, Abraham would bring them into the house, feed them, give them to drink, draw them near. So if I were to say what is needed for conversion, or I want to create a soul, that in itself maybe is the answer. It doesn't say teach them. Bring them under the wings of the divine presence. How to do so? Through the caring and showing them what it means to care. So that in itself maybe also teaches us of why these people were drawn to Abraham, very different than Noach. And we can go back to that Midrash that was discussed as well, right? That the difference between creating an ark in order to save yourself because you are a true believer and Abraham is that even if he doesn't want to, people are being magnetized to him because of the way he's acting in kindness to others. We see that with the three angels. We see that when he goes out of his way, and I think that's really something strong we see as well, that, when Abraham is in the middle of talking to Hashem, and he basically says to him, you know what? Wait a second, I have someone else. I have some guests here. I have to deal with them. And that's very powerful, I think, in terms of what does it mean to create?
Yeah, and I think that in a way, this is exactly how we are supposed to also listen to this Midrash. Like Midrash is not only a theoretical discussion of the meaning of the words of the Torah. It is a wake-up call. Like we need to imagine the rabbi stand in the synagogue telling his congregants, listen, this is your task now. It's extremely important that we also hear it in the same essence that it was taught and learned. You're supposed to do this. This is not only something, he didn't come here to explain, listen, this is something we learn about Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. This is something that you're supposed to change in your life. Probably he did like like the way when we plan a drasha. When I sit and I discuss with my brother, with my father, when we plan the drashot for the sermons for Rosh Hashanah, for Yom Kippur, where do we start? We don't start in what Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is. We start with what is the most important message that the community needs right now. And then we find the places in the Torah, in the rabbinical literature that fit with this message. But the most important question is, what is the message that is relevant now? And this, I think the rabbi did here in this verse. He didn't read the verse and then said, oh, it looks like this talks about conversions, right? He had a message he wanted to, maybe there were some issues about how do you treat the other in his community, or specifically, he believed that they need to go and spread a message about, because the message that he brings is general, right? He goes from the story about Abraham and say a principle. It is to teach you that anyone who draws a proselyte near, it is as though he created him. Okay? This is where you go from, this is what Abraham did, but this is to teach us something that anyone should learn from here. So now every one of you needs to understand and learn this message, that we have a responsibility to if you really want to create something in the world, your goal is to bring someone under the wings of God in a way of caring for them. I can say personally, I don't want to. Don't want you to understand in the wrong way. But when I look back on the 12 years I've been a rabbi here, there's no doubt that the most meaningful moment I experienced was sitting together with a Beit Din to a conversion. When you can see someone that they are looking for finding their place in their life and settling Lidgeher and all of that, and you really feel, wow, I have done something for this person. I made a difference. Like you can really feel it. I know Moshe David feels the same because we shared so many of the amazing moments now for quite a few years. And there is something about this. And I also find very difficult when people say like you have to be very strict with converts and be like how can we not try to give it to more people? And I also know that there's debate among rabbis, so that there are a few rabbis who went the direction and said we have to stop with the story about that we don't want people to become Jews. There are rabbis who talk about no, this came to a specific time, a specific place, but they actually believe that we should go out and spread a message of. It doesn't mean that we come and say everyone have to convert. It's not like a messianic thing but it's about bringing a message and a possibility and creating and being part of creation. That is something we should give because it's a present we give to other people. Rav Moshe David, what do you think about it? Is it too radical or is it exactly the essence of this midrash?
No, I think you just shot yourself in the leg because you're going to open up the Likutei Moharan right now and see exactly the opposite.
Did you send me the?
I did, yes. So you prepared yourself to be shot. You just did a very good job. So thank you.
Good, happily.
So now we got everyone interested because it sounded so beautiful and this wonderful emotional moment, and everything is nice and perfect. So let's since Rav Yair didn't see it, so I'm gonna take I'm gonna go ahead and read it.
Can you see it now?
I can see it. Yes.
Okay. Good.
Okay, so Likutei Moharan is the main compilation of the spiritual teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, and if you haven't heard of Rabbi Nachman, it's very worthwhile to look him up and to read his teachings, which in an amazing way are very relevant to spiritual seeking, I would say, in the postmodern era that we are living in. But here we are. And let's read it together. דע כשהקדוש ברוך הוא מסתכל בנשמה, שתוכל להחזיר בני אדם בתשובה ולעשות גרים, אזי הוא יתברך בעצמו כביכול מבקש ורואה שיהיה מחלוקת עליו. You shall know, when the Holy One takes note of a soul that is capable of getting people to repent and of making converts, then he himself, as it were, seeks and arranges for that soul to have opposition. In other words, it's fascinating. I find it fascinating that you have specific souls that are capable of doing two things, of bringing people to a place of repentance and of making converts. And the two of them are connected because there's, as we're talking about, if someone is to go through a process of change, right, then to become better, or right, to come closer to Hashem, to move people from the place that they were to a new place. So you need a special soul in order to do this. And without being too critical, I've unfortunately met some people, some rabbis who are involved in the process of conversion. And my feeling is that they are not the right people as educators, that they're not people who know what Rabbi Nachman is talking about here, that there's a process which is similar to what we saw with Avraham Avinu. What does it mean to accept someone, to receive them, to care for them, to allow them to go through their personal processes? Not everyone can actually do that. However, there's a very interesting end here. What does it say? that when Hashem sees such a soul, instead of saying instead of Rabbi Nachman saying, then Hashem is going to give him the power that he needs in order to be able to do such important work in this world, what does he say? Hashem arranges for that soul. What's that soul? The soul of this rabbi to have opposition. In other words, it's a clear thing that, and I think Rabbi Nachman is also talking about himself in this case, that there was a lot of opposition towards him during his lifetime, even by great rabbis of his day, that did not accept his path.
Moshe David, I thought you will say here that this is something you know very well from all the opposition we get, especially around Beit Din and conversions and all the good sword of the rabbi in Machlokes, which is definitely not L'Shem Shamayim, but only to stand and ruin in our way. So this is something that we can say, no doubt, this is exactly what Rabbi Nachman promised us.
So I'm going to keep at the spiritual level because I haven't not noted for myself. I haven't received that label to say I am such a special soul to be the one who's doing this. But I'm saying Rabbi Nachman for sure himself, when he talks about opposition, he's asking himself, why is it that I'm doing everything I can to bring people closer to Hashem, and I face opposition, which was really terrible. He faced embarrassment and by huge rabbis in his time. And why is it that such a person is facing opposition? So let's go ahead. Why is it that this is because converts are not accepted in the Messianic era or in the days of Shlomo on account of Jewish majesty. Under such circumstances, they do not convert out of love, but rather because they witness the eminence of the Jews. Sincere Gerim are mainly those who convert at a time when Jews are suffering from poverty and oppression, as it is written, who dwelled, right? You have the same word, Migar itcha ba'aniyotecha v'chulei. First of all, this is a fascinating discussion in and of itself that Maimonides also discusses. What is behind, what is bringing you forward to become a part of the Jewish people? And that part of the process of conversion is to say to those who are converting, do you realize that it's not so fun to be a Jew? And then there's huge, what happens when it actually becomes something which is beneficial? And this question was raised not so long ago, when it became economically beneficial for people to leave, to leave from communist states, right, and to make aliyah to Israel. And suddenly, if it's beneficial to leave, that background and come, is it the same? Do we have the same relationship to them? And
but Moshe David, I would say even more. What you say now is like the personal benefit, but this is not what he says here. Because what he focuses, כי אז אינם מתגיירים מאהבה, רק מחמת שרואים גדולת ישראל. He doesn't talk about the interest and the beneficial aspects. He says because they see Israel's greatness. And that's not, I feel it's more like, I have sometimes people who come to me and say they want to convert. And the reason is because they love Israel. They say, we saw amazing, Israel is so amazing. So we want to be part of this. And this is like a fun, this is not only because of the personal benefit. It's like the halachic debate about if they convert because they want to gain something. Here he says, this is a wrong motivation to focus on the greatness. That's the easy part, like being part of, it's like football fans who support those who take all the all the trophies. That the glory hunters. That's not what we're after. We're not after glory hunters. It's something that someone who understands the suffering and the hard part of Gerim. So it's not only about the economical benefit, but it's something principled about which approach they have to Israel, to Torat Israel.
So basically, you're saying that it's really good that Israel is doing such a terrible job at PR because it's not seen as the greatest nation today, And in that sense, it's maybe we can look for sincere people and not only those who see Israel as great. It's the first time I heard you may be hinting at that the terrible PR that Israel is leading today maybe is beneficial. But okay, well, let's leave that aside.
That is definitely not what I said. I don't think the PR is the problem. I think the problems are the problem, but that's a different issue.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go further down because we're asking, what does this have to do with the opposition?
Yeah.
It is therefore a necessity that someone who gets people to repent and makes converts suffer opposition in order that he have no tranquility. For then, anyone who draws close to him is sincere. Then he can make real converts, basically, not converts who are motivated by peace and contentment, as explained above. Let's just read the end of this Midrash.
Beautiful.
Vizehu, can you go down a bit? This is the explanation of Yaakov settled in the area of his father's Migurei, right? What we were talking about this entire evening. The Midrash states his father's Migurei, right? He made converts, as his father had, as it is written Migurei Aviv, of the place. And this is the explanation of what our sages of blessed memory said Yaakov settled. Yaakov sought to dwell in tranquility, but he was beset immediately by aggravation regarding Yosef. That is because Yaakov made converts, the aspect of his father's Migurei. He was unable to settle in tranquility, in order that the convert should be sincere. Had he had tranquility, he would not have been able to make converts, for converts are not accepted in the Messianic era, as explained above.
Oh, it's beautiful. I almost feel that every word we will say will ruin it.
So it goes back to, I think there's a very deep sense of what is tranquility and what is the task of the rabbi. And it could be like you were saying about Israel. Israel is great. Someone can say, my rabbi is such a wonderful spiritual leader. And it could be that that is the case. But many times, maybe those here will experience that we're actually a bit too busy more than anything else, right? And that we don't have enough time to be the spiritual leader we would want. And we don't have enough time to be sitting. I visited a friend of mine who's in Israel. We hadn't seen each other in a long time. I went to visit him, and he has a very huge synagogue, and he has a Beit Midrash. And I just walked into the rabbi's room, and it was filled with hundreds of books. And I said to him, "So you're living paradise in this world, huh?" Right? In other words, if you're dealing with people and people's problems and the family issues and whatever it is and community, then you don't have time, unfortunately, to sit and learn as much as you would have wanted. I was sort of, saying it in a nice way. It's beautiful to have that opportunity, and he is a wonderful spiritual leader, which is I'm not taking. But when you're dealing with other aspects, then you don't have the tranquility that you would want. But Rabbi Nachman is basically saying, in the Messianic era, if everything was perfect, we're not going to accept converts then. Why? Because it's not as sincere. Because why is it not as sincere? Maybe I would add from my own reflection, because life is not like that. To be a Jew is not to sit in tranquility. It's to live up to the challenges that we face. So if someone is coming from a place in which he can be very knowledgeable about the wisdom of Judaism, but he hasn't experienced the challenges of being a Jew, then maybe he's going to be creating a fake image for himself. Whereas the rabbi, the mentor here, if he has too much tranquility, then it's not going to work, right? Then it's not going to be sincere. Rabbi Nachman, I feel, is saying about himself, about the troubles that he's dealing with in his life, that he wishes he could be living in a Messianic era. But the fact that he's stepping into the mud, into the dirt to pull out the souls in order to bring them closer, it messes up a lot. And I would also add one more aspect, is that how does the community accept the others? And how does the community accept the fact that the rabbi is going out there and dealing with those who are far away, right? Those who are not close. How do we deal with it? It's much nicer, as one of my rabbis once said, every teacher wants perfect students, right? But who wants the non-perfect ones? So you have wonderful schools who create grades and the world that we live in, but what about those who are out there? Are you going out there to meet the ones that have not made it? And that, I think, is going back to the Midrash. What was Avraham Avinu doing? He was walking the path and finding those along the way who needed him. He wasn't sitting around and waiting for them to come to him. So in that sense, it's a very powerful message. He himself is not sitting, right? Bikesh Yaakov leshev b'shalva. Yaakov, maybe at the end of his life, he says, I've done so much, can I just have one quiet moment? And the answer is no, you actually can't. And why? Because you're dealing with all of those who have come up with you along the way.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I also, but I want to take it also to where we are, not only as rabbis, most of that from our perspective, but also from the place we live in, and take it back to the place where the Midrash started, of the Megurei Aviv, and how did he come from Megurei to Megiurei? And I think this tells us something also about the place we live in, the place where we are garim, mitgorerim. There was a great debate here I saw in the chat about where is it easier to live, in Israel or in Scandinavia, and I also have my opinions about it. And the main question I would say, first of all, it's not what's easier, never, as this is definitely the one thing that we learned today, that it's not about what's easiest. If it's the easiest way, then don't go there. But the other aspect that I think we should learn from what Yitzhak did, that our Jewishness is also connected to the people we live among. Like the Jewishness is not only closing ourselves in a Jewish community doing our Jewish things, that there is an aspect of creating, wherever we are, the relation we have with the locals, as a gerim, as someone who live here. There is a responsibility in our message of and our create, the place where we create is in the place where it's not there yet. And taking a real responsibility on society, on the spiritual aspects of society, on the hospitality of society, on all the aspects that Abraham does. This is a responsibility that we need to take upon ourselves, and not only close ourselves in the Daled Amot Shel Halacha, or close ourselves within the Jewish community and create events for ourselves and so on. This is the place where we are part of creation, and it will be challenging, and we will get lots of machloket, and people within the community, they won't be happy that we waste time with the whole society. We should just focus on this or focus on that. But we have a responsibility here that yes, the machloket, someone will take it upon us to show that it's always a challenge. Yes, it's not easy. It is complicated, and we are the first one that are supposed to suffer from it, because only from that place we can really meet people in the places they are. I don't know if I took it to a different direction than what you wanted to say, but this is what I felt the message I think need to be said here today.
I just am recalling how romantic it sounded when you were talking about the emotional moments of meeting the Gerim, and I'm glad that Rabbi Nachman took us to a place of complexity, and also like what does it mean, and what is this? Who is the mentor that you're looking for who will help you along this journey, which isn't so easy, and it's not. Maybe some people start out their journey looking for Judaism because it looks so beautiful, but then you have bumps on the way, and you need someone to be there for you. And as you said, also the surroundings and the relation to the surroundings that we live in. So I'm very glad that we got through 5 words of this beginning of this week's parasha, which took us a whole nother direction, which is where are we coming from? Where are our surroundings? The idea of creation. Can we actually create something in this world? Which is fascinating. We hardly touched upon that. And how it was further developed by Rabbi Nachman in terms of his own difficulty of the opposition that he faced in his lifetime to the good things that he was trying to do, and how all of this is connected to the essence of how important the converts are, the gerim, mitgorerim, to live, to be amongst, to be a part of, are in Judaism.
Maybe the best place we can do it, of Moshe David. We have Hanukkah starting on Sunday, which exactly puts this Midrash. Because how do we light Hanukkah candles? We put them in our windows. So we light the streets, but we do it from our homes. So this is exactly like Megurim. It's the place of the meeting of the home with the society around us. We don't go out to light huge Chanukiot. We do it from home. We do it in the meeting of where we are to the society around us. But we do give a gift to everything that is surrounded. We spread the light, but we do it from a very strong home, from our Mekom Megurim, from our place of living, from our Megurim out to creating something and spreading a light from that very place.
And I'll just close off with a halacha, which is that Chanukah is the only festival that we need to be at home. You can do Seder night somewhere else. Halachically, you need to be in the place which is your home, which connects also to what you're giving in as a meaning. But halacha is you need to be at your home because you need to be connected to the place where you're coming from, which is exactly what the Midrash says. And
in order to bring outside,
in order to be able to light outside. So in other words, if you're not at home, or let's say you're at the community and they light, you have to remember that you have to go home and light yourself and make the bracha, even though you've already heard the bracha. That's not the same case, let's say, with other mitzvot. If you did it, you went to the shul and you shook your lulav, you don't go home and make the bracha again, right? Here, even if you were at the community, no, you need to go home and light from your home, like Rabbi Jair, like you said, out to the street. So we finished off with the halacha leading us into Chanukah, and anyone in the Sunday Shiur, we will be learning the halachot of Chanukah on Sunday. So we'll be going through all of that. And Shabbat Shalom to everyone, and Chanukah Sameach to you all. And really, Bezrat Hashem, you should fill yourself with light, so you can have light and hope, which is much needed in order to be able to spread that with others as well. So Shabbat Shalom, Chanukah Sameach to everyone. Thank you, Rabbi Jair, for this chavruta tonight.
Shabbat Shalom.